Welcome back to Elevate Your Wealth. I'm Casey Elkins here with Mark Stimpson. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's so nice to be with you, Casey, as always, and I'm very glad to be with our viewers today because I think what we're going to talk about today is going to have an impact on you, and hopefully we're going to maybe give you some ideas on how to lessen the impact when it comes to what's happening with election. Everybody seems to get really, really worried when we're in an election year, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Right. As we know, it's an election year. There's a lot of concern, a lot of turmoil in the market, right? And we understand the trepidation that people have. But every time it's an election, this happens, right? We see this constantly. It's kind of like this regular cycle that we can expect every 4 years. And so, we're seeing it in the office, right? We see people concerned about what's going on. We've definitely felt it in the markets. But there is positives that we can bring out as well, right, when it comes to that. So we want to make sure that we're being balanced as we think about the election and what's coming up and how that's having an impact on our investment accounts and that kind of thing. So I know we see this at in the office, Mark. So tell me a little bit about what you think about that.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny you mentioned that case because that's probably one of the #1 concerns. People would like us to be able to tell them how to invest right now, and we're just not going to do that. Nobody knows or can predict what the market is going to do. It's interesting. There's been a study, and we're going to talk about one of the studies, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or maybe you're a total independent, or maybe you remain neutral when it comes to politics. But again, helping to deal with all this outside noise, all the rhetoric, because it is very interesting when you look at some of these studies, how off investors really are in thinking that it's going to make a tremendous difference to them if it's a Democrat, if they are a Democrat, or if they're a Republican. It's going to make a world of difference to them. They're going to do a lot better with their investments if a Republican gets in office, right? But the data doesn't bear that out, and that's something we want to try and we want to back some of our clients off the ledge a little bit, right? Because there is so much concern about this right now that it's one of the first and foremost questions when clients come into our office they would like an answer to, and we just will try and calm their fears, have them take a deep breath, and remember that the best advice: stick with your plan. Hopefully you have a written plan. If you don't, you should think about getting one. But what we do is we want to put together a plan where our clients are successful no matter who is in office.
Right.
That's the key, right? They are not going to be stressing about the election and going, oh my gosh, if a Democrat wins, I'm going down the drain, right? My income's going to be cut in half, or whatever their belief system is, because we all have certain biases, right? And depending on which way they lean when it comes to politics, we remain neutral in that regard, right? Because we believe that's a good stance to take when it comes to investing. But a lot of people still, their emotions are tied to their investing. So we've got to help them calm those emotions down a little bit in an election year, because it probably isn't going to be near as bad as what they're envisioning in their own mind is going to happen if their candidate that they are backing doesn't win. Right? That's the key. What are you going to do if your candidate doesn't win? Well, we all know the stories in this regard. So again, having a solid written plan is going to help mitigate any concern when it comes to political bias.
Right. Yeah, and the market election, or the election, causes FUD in the market, right? So FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? And we see that. We see that when we talk with people. They're fearful of what's going on. We can tell that they're uncertain about what's coming up, and they're doubtful of what they hear in the media, right? And so, I think it's important to say that, of course, the media is there to inform, but also at times the media does not always get the story 100% accurate, and so the media can cause even more.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Really?
But
there's nothing like fake news.
The media can cause more of that uncertainty, right? More of that fear based on how things are presented. And so it's really important to have that plan that is not dependent on on what happens in the market. Now, as we were preparing for this, we were talking about a few things, and I wrote a couple of them down. I think this is important. 32% of investors believe the economy will plunge into a recession within 12 months if the political party they least align with gains power, right? So it's just if the opposite political party gains power, they're thinking that there will be a recession within 12 months, right? And we definitely heard quite a bit of that, right? When Trump was elected years ago, everybody was concerned that the market was going to take a dive. That was the overarching story. And what happened? The market has had a huge run up since then, right? So things have actually gone the other way. Now, I think that's a very interesting piece to the puzzle. But, you know, one thing we will say is that leading up to an election, there's always that volatility in the market. But very commonly, the market doesn't actually care who is in office. It just cares that there's somebody in office, right? So the certainty of having that decision made generally calms the market volatility that we see leading up to it. It's the uncertainty of that election that causes the volatility. So that's an important piece of the puzzle. I thought this was interesting too. 80% of investors are worried about a possible recession. And then here, Republicans, Democrats, and independents believe that the outcome of a presidential election will have a direct and immediate and or lasting impact on the performance of the stock market. So investors as a whole are concerned about which political party is in office, but that brings us right back to the point that very commonly the market is not actually concerned about that, right? It's just concerned that there is somebody in office and that we know who that is. So it's important to make sure we're getting our information properly, right? We're thinking about the information that we receive and kind of analyzing that a little bit and not just letting all of this happen to us, but instead having a plan that helps us through it, right?
Yeah, because again, that political bias that we may have, the data really shows us that the market doesn't care, as Casey just mentioned. It's much more important to stick to good investment principles, no matter who is in office, right? It's not trying to time the market, but it's, as Casey, you say it all the time, it's time in the market. And so if we believe we want a Republican to win, and he doesn't, well, do we pull out then and go against those principles? That's the key, right? There's so much noise out there about this, but we would tell all of the viewers, don't let all of this noise affect you like this. Stay with your principles when it comes to investment. And we are guided a lot more by age of our clients and making sure that we do age-based planning so they're not taking too much risk on as they get closer to retirement. If they're younger, we can afford to take some more risk because they can have more time in the market if the market does correct, right? Or if there's a downturn that none of us saw coming. So again, it's about a solid plan, because if you have a great written plan, it's going to allow you to not stress out no matter who wins the election. And a lot of our clients are telling us how much they appreciate that now when they didn't have that in the past. And so again, we would tell our viewers, don't let a Democrat or Republican dictate what you should do when it comes to investing, because I think our overall belief is that's a mistake, because either one, the principles and what the market does is going to react probably pretty much the same no matter who's in office. They just care that there's somebody there, like you mentioned, versus whether he's a Democrat or an independent or Republican.
Right. That idea of Democrat or Republican, as far as it goes to the market, I think actually pertains more to people's comfortability when it comes to the market, not actually the market performance, right? So it's about making sure that we take that bias out of it, as you said, and plan accordingly and actually build a financial plan that allows us to be successful despite what's happening in the market, right? So for those watching from home, this is your opportunity to get a written financial plan that'll help make you successful despite what's going on in the market. Our team of certified financials will assemble this for you. We'll talk about risk, we'll talk about your investments, the taxes that you're going to pay, health care when it comes to retirement, and all those things that have been gnawing at you, keeping you up at night. So don't hesitate. Pick up the phone, 844 844-342-7142, or scan the QR code that you see there on the screen. This is also your opportunity to come into the office and get a copy of our book, Break the Glass. We'll include that complimentary when you come to see us. Call the number 844-342-7142. We'll be right back on Elevate Your Wealth talking more about investing during an election year.
We know the market is going to get worse from here. This is the biggest monthly decline in 10 years. People's 401ks took a major hit.
Well, my investments are tanking. My retirement isn't going as planned. I can't believe I let my kid talk me into buying crypto. I mean, what is that anyway?
This was the fourth worst contraction in history.
So how are you two doing?
Your financial future doesn't have to be uncertain. I'm Casey Elkins of Elevated Financial Management. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. This is one of the greatest tax windows in history. Now is the time to take advantage of this tax discount while you can. We specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and so much more. Plan your retirement right. Call now for your own complimentary portfolio review and written financial plan. Welcome back to Elevate Your Wealth. I'm your host, Casey Elkins, joined by Mark Stimpson. We're talking about investing during an election year and what we can do to mitigate the risk associated with that and really set ourselves up to be successful when it comes to our retirement plan. Now, Mark, as we've been discussing this, there's a couple things that come to mind. One of them is that folks are thinking, or maybe actually realizing, that they are doing better in their investments based on their political affiliation. Is there truth behind that?
Yeah, well, we would tell you, again, it's like Paul Harvey used to say, what's the truth or the rest of the story, right? The bottom line is that depending on your political bias, if you're the person that you are wanting to vote for gets into office, you're more optimistic. So you end up putting more into the market during those years, where it's the exact opposite. If your candidate doesn't win, then you tend to put less in the market. So there could be truth to the fact that, well, if your candidate wins, you do better, but that's only because of what was in your mind and how you invested, right? If you'd have stayed with basic principles, you know, just like modern portfolio theory has us invest in ups and down times, right? We don't try and time the market. As you talk about, it's cost averaging, right, is what's going to help us to win that battle, right? So again, the data really shows us it doesn't matter who wins. If you stay with certain good investing principles, you're going to still make money. Okay, now how much we don't know, or you could lose at the market if we do have a recession. But the point is, the person in office is most likely not going to be one to cause you to make more or less. It's going to be your principles and your investment patterns that's really going to dictate how much money you make, no matter who's in office.
Yeah, no, that's true, right? Because it's the emotional decision behind it, right? So we see that based on who is elected, maybe it's the opposite party, the people that are making the investment selections in their own personal investments, they're affected in a negative way because they're concerned, and so they move to cash or whatever it is that they do, and they become more conservative. And if the market does then run up, they're actually losing out, right? Whereas if it's your political party, then you invest more potentially, and when the market does well, then you do better. So, you know, and that's not to say that the opposite couldn't be true. It's possible that after the election, things do go down. But here's the key, and you mentioned this, right? We say this all the time. It's about time in the market, not timing the market. So if we're in the market, we need to be in, right? If we're going to invest in the market, we need to be committed to that. If you're trying to time the market, you're really trying to day trade or swing trade. And the reality is most people are not successful at that. Very few are. And even the ones that are will caution you against trying it because it's a very complicated thing to do. And most of the time they're not winning, right? So we want to be very cautious about how we think about our investments. And, you know, we know that there is two emotions that drive investors, right? It's fear and greed. So much so that there's a fear and greed index, right? So if the opposite political party of the way that you lean is getting voted into office, you may become fearful, and that drives your investing decisions, right? Whereas if the political party that you side with is in office, maybe you're a little bit more greedy, as it were, and so you invest more. And so we want to be very cautious about letting those emotions drive what we do, and instead look to build a plan that sets you up to be successful despite what's happening in the political world or any of those kinds of things. We want folks to have a written financial plan that sets them up for success no matter what's going on.
Yeah, in fact, I want our viewers to really think back on this for a second. Think about the past 14 years. We've been on one of the greatest bull runs in market history. And think about who's been president during that time. We've had a Democrat, a Republican, and another Democrat, right? And possibly now maybe a Republican. We don't know. But the point is, think about what did the market do during these different terms of these different presidents. Did pretty well. So everybody's been on the greedy train for a while now. And we're struggling with getting clients, especially those that are getting closer to retirement, being willing to get off of that train and maybe go more into preservation versus growth, which we believe is, again, a central tenet to good income planning based on your age. Because if you lose a big chunk right as you're starting retirement, it can devastate your plan. And we know you do a great job at our workshops in talking about this, because your money that was maybe going to last 25 years now is gone in 15 or 16 years.
Right.
Then what do you do, right? So again, your political bias can have a positive or a negative effect. But again, if you state a basic tenets to investing and don't let all the noise cause you to panic no matter who wins or loses, you're probably going to come out ahead. And a lot of the data, which we're not going to go into today, supports that. So again, please don't listen to everybody or all the water cooler talk, because there's a lot of opinions out there. And if you were to Google this, you'll have 50% of the people will tell you, oh, the Democrats, you do way better with your money when a Democrat's in office, or way better if a Republican. We know that's just not the case. The data doesn't prove this, and we've been doing this long enough to see this. There have been a lot of presidents come and go in my time of doing this type of planning, and so, you know, all I know is when we put together a solid plan, our clients do very well if they don't get too much tied up into the political bias and the political noise that's going on right now.
Yeah, we can't let that control how we make decisions, right? And you mentioned it earlier, time horizon for the investments, right? That's really what determines how we should invest, is when we need the money. You know, somebody who's 40 years old does not need to be invested the same way that somebody who's 60 or 65 or 70 years old. Because somebody who's 40 doesn't need their money to produce income for them for 20, 25 years, right? But somebody who's 60, 65, approaching retirement, recently into retirement, the way that their life is set up is very different, and they're going to need income sooner rather than later. And so we have to structure the investments based on the time horizon of when we need the money and our individual circumstance, instead of trying to base our investment decisions on who's in political office, because how that affects the market, we don't know. We can't control that, right? But we can absolutely control how we invest and how we let our emotions drive our investing decisions. So we want to be cautious and careful as we make those decisions to make sure that we're not letting emotion drive all of those factors for us, and instead building a financial plan that is suited to what we're looking for. So Mark, with that in mind, maybe you can share with the viewers at home what they can expect if they give us a call.
Yeah, please pick up the phone and call 844-342-7142. Let our team of certified financial planners look at your individual situation. How are you invested? Casey does a wonderful job of analysis of the portfolio using Morningstar and Quanti. Help us, let us help you figure out your income. Is it going to be guaranteed? What about your medical? What are you going to do there, and any legacy planning that you need to get done? So please pick up the phone. Call 844-342-7142 and let our team of experts put together a plan. Keep the checkbook at home, but pick up the phone and give us a call.
Thank you very much, Mark. So again, that number is 844-342-7142. You see it there across the screen. There's also a QR code that you can scan and schedule your visit with us that way. It's a complimentary written financial plan. Along with that, you'll get a copy of our book, Break the Glass. You'll get that when you come into the office to see us, so don't hesitate. Pick up the phone and give us a call. We'll talk more about investing, letting emotions drive our investing decisions, and investing during an election year when we come back on Elevate Your Wealth.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Welcome back to Elevate Your Wealth. I'm your host, Casey Elkins, here with Mark Stimpson. We're talking about investing, letting emotions drive our investing, and investing during an election year. And so many decisions to make. How does it affect you? How does it have a lasting impact on your retirement? And so, Mark, with that being the case, we were just talking during the break about being careful to let our emotions drive our decisions when it comes to investments. We do hear people that kind of understand what we're getting at, that we don't want to allow that, and yet we still hear people saying, well, you know, if the other political office gets in, then I'm going to move a lot of my investments to cash. Yeah. And, you know, it actually reminds me of a particular story. Somebody that we met with, that was a gentleman from California who had done just that. So right before Trump was elected, he had decided that things were going to be really volatile if Trump got into office. As soon as Trump got into office, this gentleman moved all of his investments to cash. And then what happened? The market took off. It ran away without him, right? And then he was so concerned about getting back in at the wrong time, because as the market continued to climb, he was worried about purchasing and then letting the market fall, right? So he was worried about the bad timing of all of it. And he sat out through that entire run-up that Trump was in office, and even beyond, because he didn't have a plan and he didn't know what to do. And so we've got to make sure that we don't let those type of emotions drive the decisions that we make.
Yeah, in fact, you know, that brings to mind the very similar story with what happened in 2008. We all know the collapse financially due to mortgages and banking nonsense that occurred. But one of my Boeing clients did the exact same thing. He panicked. He went all into what's known as a stable fund, which is great, but it's their really conservative, almost like a money market account. But he never went back in, and just as you mentioned, he missed that whole run-up. He would have over doubled his money. So that $1.5 million could have easily been $3 to $3.5, maybe $4 million, had he, especially if he'd bought a bunch of the Boeing stock at that time, right? So again, he let fear took over, as we talk about fear and greed. Fear took over, and he was never able to get past that fear again, and he missed a massive run-up. So again, if you have a balanced plan and you have some of that money protected, it's going to allow us to be more aggressive and not panic, because all our money is either invested in too conservative or too aggressive. That's why a plan can take all of that trepidation away and allow the different buckets of money. We keep it simple in our office: red, yellow, green. Yellow money is money that's in bank inventory, right? Everyday life occurs. We need a good amount, 6 to 12 months of normal expenses in that bucket. The green bucket is our protected growth bucket, the money that we can create a private pension from. And then the red bucket is the bucket that is going to be in the market. But if we have enough in the red, in the green and the yellow bucket, we can afford to be a little more aggressive in the red, because we might not need that money for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So it allows us to take a lot more risk on, because we have a plan, right? Instead of all in one bucket or another. That's where the problem with so many that are letting their investment bias, their political bias determine what they do from a risk standpoint and an investment standpoint. And for a lot of people, it's backfired. They have got the exact opposite result of what they could have had they just stayed with basic principles or had somebody that could really help them. And we talk about this time, just walk them back off the ledge a little bit and invest the right way.
Right. You know, that comes back again to timing the market, right? And you may not be consciously thinking, well, I'm going to time the market and win. But if you're moving to cash because of what's happening politically and then trying to purchase back in at another time, that's what you're doing, right? I mean, you're trying to time the market. Again, that may not be your conscious thought, but that's effectively what you're trying to do. And when we look at the market, there are very bad days, as we've seen in the last few years. There are times where there is big downturns, but there's also times where there's great growth in the market in a given day or in a given week. And if we move to cash and miss those big days and then think that we're going to buy back in at the right time, that really puts us in, it backs us into a corner, right? And so it's better to have a plan that allows you to stay invested and allows you to still have the same income. And as you mentioned, the 3 buckets, right? Well, each of those 3 buckets requires a different type of investment. We don't, the money that we have in checking and savings to just support our liquidity needs for 6 to 12 months worth of spending when it comes to retirement, well, that's not the same money that we have invested in the green bucket. And the green bucket guarantees our income. And that's not the same money that we have invested in the red bucket, which is our long-term growth money. That's our money that we use in the market. So each one of those things is necessary. It's not an either or conversation, it's an and conversation. I need the yellow and I need the green and I need the red, and I need them all working in harmony, in unison together, because they're each doing something different, right? And so when it comes to the investments that we have to play each one to its strength to make sure that we're setting ourselves up to be successful. All too often people get caught up in this idea of I put it in the market and that is what's going to create all of my income and my growth and all these things. And that's just not the truth. We have to have a plan that accounts for that. So Mark, share with our viewers at home what they can expect if they give us a call.
Please pick up the phone and call 844-342-7142. As we just mentioned, let us help you figure out taxes, what you're invested, the type of investments you're using right now, because that can determine success or failure. So please pick up the phone, call 844-342-7142. Let us help you with, we talked about taxes, but Medicare, legacy planning. But again, let us help you to put together a plan so that you can have a truly successful and stress-free retirement.
So again, you see the number there, 844-342-7142. Scan the QR code, give us a call, whatever's more convenient for you. Again, it's a complimentary written financial plan put together by our team of certified financial planners, custom tailored to exactly what it is that you need in retirement. Please join us again back here next week on Elevate Your Wealth, where we'll talk more about retirement as it pertains to you.